I was standing in the courthouse hallway, waiting for my son's name to be called, when a janitor I'd never seen before stopped his cart in front of me and said, very quietly, "You shouldn't be here yet." His keys were labeled with masking tape instead of metal tags. He nodded toward a closed door and told me to stand behind the vending machine. 5 minutes later, I heard my son explaining how he learned to lie to me. And in that moment, everything I thought I had protected began to fall apart. I was standing in the courthouse hallway, waiting for my son's name to be called, when a janitor I'd never seen before stopped his cart in front of me and said, very quietly, "You shouldn't be here yet." His keys were labeled with masking tape instead of metal tags. He nodded toward a closed door and told me to stand behind the vending machine. 5 minutes later, I heard my son explaining how he learned to lie to me. And in that moment, everything I thought I had protected began to fall apart. A week earlier, I would have laughed if someone told me a courthouse would become the place where my family cracked open. I wasn't the kind of person who lived in crisis. I worked steady hours, paid my bills, kept my head down. I was a compliance manager for a regional hospital network outside Columbus, Ohio. Paperwork, policies, training staff to follow rules that felt invisible until something went wrong. My life revolved around preventing disasters you didn't see until they hit the headlines. My son, Caleb Monroe, was 26, quiet, smart, the kind of kid who used to line up his toy cars by color and tell me the exact date of every holiday. His father, Mark, died when Caleb was 12, and after that it was just the two of us. I didn't date. I didn't travel. I didn't do anything that made me feel like I was stepping away from him for even a second. I told myself it was love. I told myself it was sacrifice. I told myself it was the right thing. Now, here I was on a Monday morning in downtown Columbus, sitting on a hard bench under fluorescent lights, waiting for my son to walk into a courtroom with his fiancé's family watching. Caleb was engaged to a woman named Tessa Hart. She was a public relations coordinator for a state senator. Polished, warm smile, always knew what to say. When Caleb brought her to my house the first time, she'd walked in with a bouquet of tulips like she was stepping into a magazine shoot. She hugged me like we were already family. She called me Mrs. Monroe in a voice that made it sound like a compliment. The problem wasn't Tessa. Not exactly. The problem was her mother, Veronica Hart. Veronica had a way of holding a room without raising her voice. She was a family court mediator, which meant she spent her days negotiating other people's divorces, custody battles, financial settlements. She had a calm face that never changed, even when she said sharp things. If you disagreed with her, she didn't argue. She just waited until you ran out of words and then smiled like she'd known you would. At the engagement dinner, she'd taken my hand and said, "Caleb's so lucky. A mother like you. Strong women raise strong sons." It sounded like praise, but something about the way she said it felt like she was measuring me. In the months after that, Veronica inserted herself into everything. Wedding planning, venue selection, guest list, even Caleb's career decisions. He worked in IT security for a small company, mostly remote, mostly quiet work. Veronica acted like it was temporary, like his real life hadn't started yet until he married into their world. And then, 3 days ago, I got a call from Veronica that I still can't fully explain. "Lena," she said, like we were old friends, "there's a minor legal issue we need to clean up before the wedding. Caleb needs you there for it. Nothing serious, just formalities." I was in my kitchen when she called. My coffee was cooling on the counter. The morning news was murmuring in the background. I remember staring at the sink full of dishes and thinking how strange it was to hear her voice in my home. "What kind of legal issue?" I asked. "A misunderstanding," she said smoothly. "It happens. It's better if family is present. Caleb asked me to call you." Caleb didn't call me himself. That was the first thing that bothered me. He and I talked at least twice a week, sometimes more. Even if it was just a quick check-in, even if it was just him sending me a photo of the dog he and Tessa were thinking about adopting. But for 3 days after Veronica's call, he didn't answer my texts. He didn't pick up when I called. No explanation. just silence. So I showed up at the courthouse. The hallway smelled like old carpet and disinfectant. People moved past me with folders tucked under their arms, eyes forward like they'd learned not to look at anyone else's pain. On the wall across from me was a poster about mediation services, smiling stock photo families holding hands, the kind of picture that pretended everything could be fixed if you just tried hard enough. I checked in at the front desk and gave Caleb's name. The clerk asked me to sit and wait. I sat. I watched the clock over the doorway. Every minute felt like something tightening inside me. And then, just when I started to stand up and walk toward the courtroom doors, the janitor stopped his cart in front of me. He was maybe late 50s, lean, gray hair cut short. His uniform was clean but worn at the elbows. He didn't smile. He didn't look dramatic. He looked tired, like someone who'd spent years watching people pretend they were fine. "You shouldn't be here yet," he said. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He angled his body so his cart blocked me from the security camera above the water fountain. I noticed that without knowing why it mattered, his keys hung from his belt, a big ring of them. Each one had masking tape wrapped around it with black marker labels. Door A, Supply, East. Like someone had taken the time to make sure nothing got mixed up. "You're Lena Monroe," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. "Who are you?" He didn't answer that. He looked past me at the courtroom door as if he was listening for something. "You're waiting for Caleb, your son." I couldn't speak for a second. "How do you know?" "Stand behind the vending machine," he said, cutting me off, still calm. "Don't move. Don't make eye contact with anyone who comes out. Just listen. You'll understand." Everything in me wanted to back away. This was a courthouse. This was the kind of place where strangers didn't give you secret instructions. This was the kind of place where you stayed visible, where you did things the right way. But there was something in his face that I recognized. Not panic, not excitement. Something worse. Something steady and grim. Like he'd already seen what was coming, and he was trying to spare me the first blow. "I'm here because my son." I started. "Your son is already inside," he said. "And you are not ready for what you're about to hear." He shifted his cart slightly, making a narrow path that guided me toward the vending machine, tucked into a corner near a bulletin board. It was one of those older machines with a glass front and spirals holding candy bars. The fluorescent lights above it flickered, barely noticeable unless you stood close enough to see the tiny stutter in the glow. I walked behind it because my legs moved on their own. The janitor leaned in just enough for me to smell peppermint on his breath. 5 minutes, he said. "That's all you need." Then he pushed his cart forward and rolled away as if nothing happened. I stood there in the corner, half hidden by the vending machine and a stack of folded metal chairs. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I tried to convince myself I was being ridiculous, that this was some misunderstanding, that the janitor had me confused with someone else. That Caleb was fine and this was just paperwork and we'd laugh about it later. Then the courtroom door opened. Voices spilled into the hallway. A woman laughed, light and controlled. I recognized it instantly, Veronica Hart. Her voice always sounded like she was smiling even when she wasn't. Behind her, Caleb spoke. I heard his voice before I saw him. It was softer than hers, but it carried. He sounded nervous, like someone trying to hit lines he'd rehearsed. "I just want this handled the right way," Caleb said. Veronica's tone turned gentle, almost maternal. "It will be. You're doing exactly what you should be doing. You're being responsible." A man's voice responded, older, official. "Once we file the stipulation, it becomes part of the record. There's no undoing that." Caleb hesitated. "And she won't be notified today?" Veronica answered for him. "Not until it's served. We want it done cleanly. Caleb doesn't need drama. He has a wedding in 8 days." I felt cold spread through my chest. They weren't talking about Tessa. They weren't talking about a speeding ticket or a minor misunderstanding. They were talking about serving someone, filing something, making it part of the record. The older man spoke again. "Just to confirm, Mr. Monroe, you're stating under oath that you've had no financial assistance from your mother since you turned 18. Caleb didn't answer right away. I could almost see him in my mind, shoulders tense, eyes down. The little boy who used to confess if he stole a cookie because guilt ate him alive. The teenager who apologized if he accidentally slammed a door. Veronica's voice slid in, soft as velvet. Caleb, remember what we practiced. You're not lying. You're reclaiming your independence. Then Caleb spoke, and his words landed so calmly it was like being cut without realizing it. Yes, he said. No financial assistance. 2. I had to clamp my hand over my mouth because a sound tried to escape me. It wasn't a sob. It wasn't a gasp. It was something raw, animal, like pain turning into noise. Because it was a lie. I had been paying his student loan interest for years. Quietly. Not because he asked, but because I didn't want him drowning. I had covered his car repairs, his first security deposit, his medical bills when he broke his wrist. I had done it without making him beg, without humiliating him, without ever holding it over his head. And now my son was standing in a courthouse, preparing to erase every sacrifice I'd made, as if it never happened. The older man continued, You're also stating that your mother has interfered in your personal relationships to the point of emotional distress. Veronica's laugh was soft. You could say that, yes. Caleb's voice trembled, then steadied, like he'd found the script. She's intense. She doesn't respect boundaries. She shows up. She calls. She makes it hard to breathe. I stared at the floor tiles because if I looked up, I thought I might fall over. Veronica said, We'll request a temporary protection order as a precaution, just until after the wedding. It'll keep things peaceful. A protection order. Against me. For a moment, everything inside me went quiet, like my brain couldn't process the words fast enough to feel them. Then it hit, all at once, and I understood why Caleb hadn't answered my calls, why Veronica called me instead of him, why she wanted me at the courthouse but not in the room. She didn't want me there to support him. She wanted me there to witness my own replacement. And the worst part wasn't that Veronica was doing it. The worst part was that my son was letting her teach him how. I pressed my back against the wall behind the vending machine. My hands were shaking, but my face stayed still. I listened as the voices moved farther down the hallway. Veronica guiding Caleb with quiet praise, the official voice giving instructions, footsteps fading like it was just another day, and standing there in that corner, hidden behind a machine humming with stale soda and candy bars, I realized something that made my stomach turn. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a plan, and I was the target. I didn't know yet what Veronica had told Caleb about me, or what she had promised him in return, or how long she'd been shaping him into someone who could say those words without choking on them. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever I thought my relationship with my son was, it wasn't that anymore. And whatever I believed was true about our family was about to be proven wrong in the most public, permanent way possible. I didn't step out from behind the vending machine until the hallway was empty again. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, steady and indifferent. The janitor was gone. The courtroom door was closed. My reflection stared back at me from the glass of the machine, pale and unfamiliar, like I'd aged 10 years in 5 minutes. I checked my phone. No missed calls, no texts. Nothing from Caleb. Nothing from Veronica. I slid the phone back into my bag like it might burn me. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to walk straight into the courtroom and demand an explanation. Another part of me knew that if I did that, I would only confirm everything Veronica had just framed me as: unstable, intrusive, a problem to be managed. So I left. I walked out of the courthouse into the cold Ohio air and stood on the steps for a long time, letting people pass me without seeing me. Cars moved through the intersection. A bus hissed as it pulled away from the curb. Life continued at the same pace it always had, completely unaware that mine had just fractured. When I got home, the house felt wrong. Too quiet. Too still. I dropped my purse on the kitchen table and stood there staring at it, like if I didn't move, maybe the morning would rewind itself. Maybe the last hour would dissolve into something less sharp. But it didn't. I sat down and replayed every word I'd heard. The phrasing, the legal tone, the way Veronica spoke like she was guiding a child through a math problem, not convincing my son to sign something that could erase me from his life. I realized with sick clarity that this wasn't about one document or one court appearance. This was about control, about narrative, about rewriting history so cleanly that I wouldn't recognize myself in it. My phone buzzed on the table. Caleb. For a second, I just stared at his name. My hands were trembling when I picked it up. Mom, he said quickly, before I could speak. I know you're probably confused. Probably. I was at the courthouse, I said. My voice sounded calm, almost detached, and that scared me more than if I'd been crying. Silence. Then a breath. You weren't supposed to be there yet. That word again. Yet. Caleb, I said slowly, what is going on? He hesitated, and I could hear someone else breathing on the line, not speaking, just there, listening. Veronica, it's complicated, he said. Tessa's mom thinks it's better if we create some distance for a while. Distance. That was the word they used for severing ties now. Distance from what? I asked. From me. Mom, please, he said. You've been intense about the wedding, about everything. I closed my eyes. You asked me to help with the seating chart. You asked me to review the vendor contracts. You called me when you were stressed. I know, he said, and his voice cracked for half a second before smoothing out. But it felt like pressure, like you didn't trust me to make my own decisions. And this, I said quietly, is you making your own decision? Another pause. Longer this time. Veronica spoke, her voice sliding in like she belonged there. Lena, no one is attacking you. We're just trying to help Caleb start his marriage without unnecessary conflict. I felt something harden in my chest. I'm not speaking to you. She laughed softly. See? That's what I mean. Caleb, I said, ignoring her. Are you filing something against me? He didn't answer. Caleb. Yes, he said finally. But it's temporary, just until after the wedding. It's not a big deal. A protection order wasn't a big deal. Being legally barred from contacting my own son wasn't a big deal. You stood in a courtroom and said I've never helped you, I said. You said I caused you emotional distress. His voice dropped. I didn't mean it like that. But you said it, I replied. Under oath. Silence again. I imagined Veronica watching him, nodding slightly, encouraging him not to backtrack. You've always wanted what's best for me, Caleb said carefully. But sometimes that feels like control. Tessa and her mom helped me see that. There it was. The seed. The framing. The story he'd been given to explain his discomfort, his guilt, his fear of independence. Not manipulation, just clarity, just growth. I paid your student loans, I said. I covered your medical bills. I helped you when you asked. And I appreciate that, he said quickly. But that's exactly the point. I don't want to owe you anymore. I swallowed. So you erase me? I'm not erasing you, he said. I'm setting boundaries. The word landed heavy. Boundaries. The respectable cousin of abandonment. I need time, he continued. Please don't contact me until after the wedding. If you do, it'll just make things worse. Worse how? I asked. Veronica answered. There are legal consequences, Lena. Let's not escalate this. I hung up. I stood in my kitchen shaking, my phone still in my hand, and understood something that made my stomach turn. They weren't afraid of me anymore. They were confident enough to warn me instead of placate me, confident enough to believe I had no leverage. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, replaying the sound of Caleb's voice when he said he'd learned to breathe without me. I thought about the way he used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, the way he'd hold onto my sleeve at school events, the way he'd cried when his father died and begged me not to leave him too. When did love turn into something they could weaponize? At 3 a.m, I got up and walked into my home office. I opened the filing cabinet where I kept old paperwork, tax returns, insurance forms, loan statements. I didn't know what I was looking for yet, only that I needed to understand what story Veronica was telling and how she was backing it up. I found it in a folder labeled Miscellaneous, a notarized affidavit, dated 2 months ago, signed by Caleb. It stated that he was financially independent and that any prior assistance had been mischaracterized by me as support when it was, in fact, conditional leverage. My hands went numb. There was a witness signature at the bottom, Veronica Hart. I sat back in my chair and stared at the page until the words blurred. This hadn't started 3 days ago. It hadn't started with the wedding. It had started quietly, professionally, with documents and language that turned love into liability. My phone buzzed again, a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then it buzzed again, a text this time. You don't know me, but I was there today. Please don't delete this. You're not crazy. My breath caught. Meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the cafe on Broad Street, corner booth. Come alone. There was no name, no explanation. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, and thought about the janitor. The masking tape labels, the way he'd blocked the camera, the way he'd known my name. Someone else saw this coming. And for the first time since I'd stepped into that courthouse, I realized I wasn't as alone as Veronica wanted me to believe. Whatever she was building around my son, whatever version of me she was constructing in his mind, someone had been close enough to notice the cracks. I typed back a single word. Okay. Then I turned off my phone, sat in the dark, and waited for morning, knowing that whatever truth was coming next would change everything I thought I knew about my family and about how far power could reach when it dressed itself up as concern. I didn't tell anyone where I was going the next morning. There was no one left to tell. I left my house early, before the sun fully came up, and drove downtown with the radio off, letting my thoughts run loud and unchecked. Every red light felt longer than it should have. Every passing car made me tense, like someone might recognize me, like the story Veronica was building had already started spreading. The cafe on Broad Street was one of those places that looked intentionally ordinary. Exposed brick, reclaimed wood tables, handwritten menu boards. It smelled like espresso and burnt toast. I ordered black coffee and slid into the corner booth like the text instructed. My back to the wall, my eyes on the door. At exactly 10 o'clock, a woman walked in and scanned the room once before spotting me. She was in her early 30s, maybe mid-30s, wearing a navy blazer that didn't quite hide how thin she was. Her hair was pulled back too tightly, like she didn't trust it to stay put. She hesitated before approaching, then sat down across from me without asking. "Lena Monroe," she said quietly. "Yes. My name is Erin Wallace," she said. "I work for the Franklin County Clerk's office." My chest tightened. "You were at the courthouse." She nodded. "Records division. I don't normally interact with cases directly, but sometimes things cross my desk that shouldn't." I didn't speak. I didn't trust myself to. Erin wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, even though she hadn't ordered one yet. "Yesterday morning, a packet came through for expedited filing, protective order request, affidavit, supporting documentation. Everything was clean, too clean." "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said carefully, "it read like it had been rehearsed, like someone who knows the system wrote it for someone else to sign." My heart started pounding. "You're saying Caleb didn't?" "I'm saying the language didn't match prior filings from your son," she interrupted gently. "I checked. Public record. He doesn't write like that. He doesn't phrase things like that. Someone coached him." I stared at her, my coffee untouched. "Why are you telling me this?" Erin looked down at the table for a moment, then met my eyes. "Because 3 years ago, I watched the same woman do this to my sister." The name didn't need to be said. "Veronica Hart," Erin continued. "She mediated my sister's custody case, became a confidant, then slowly reframed every concern my sister's ex had as manipulation, helped my sister file for a restraining order that wasn't entirely honest." "What happened?" I asked. Erin swallowed. "My sister won full custody. The ex lost access to his kids. 6 months later, The court reversed it after an appeal, but by then the damage was done. The kids didn't recognize their father anymore. He moved out of state. He hasn't seen them since. My stomach churned. Did anyone hold her accountable? Erin shook her head. Everything was technically legal. That's her specialty. She never lies outright. She just frames the truth so precisely that it becomes something else. I thought of Caleb's voice. Calm, careful. The way he'd said my love made it hard to breathe. She's doing it again, Erin said. And this time, she's using family instead of an ex-spouse. That's more dangerous. End of quote. I leaned back against the booth, my hands shaking now. Can you prove it? Erin reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. She slid it across the table toward me, but didn't let go right away. I shouldn't have this, she said. And if you use it publicly, I'll deny I ever gave it to you. I nodded. I understand. She released the envelope. Inside were copies of internal emails, scheduling notes, draft affidavits with tracked changes. I recognized Veronica's name in the metadata, comments in the margins, suggested phrasing, emotional prompts disguised as legal guidance. Use language about suffocation here. Reinforce pattern of control. Frame concern as anxiety response. My hands went cold. She didn't just prepare him, I whispered. She taught him how to talk about me. Erin nodded. She taught him how to become believable. I closed the folder slowly. Why hasn't anyone stopped her? Erin's expression hardened. Because people like her don't need to win every case. They just need to win long enough to reshape relationships. I sat there for a long time after Erin left, staring at the envelope like it might explode. The evidence was real, concrete, devastating, and completely useless if I brought it to Caleb now. If I showed him, he'd see it as proof of exactly what Veronica had told him, that I was digging, intruding, refusing to let go. She had positioned herself perfectly. Any move I made would reinforce her story. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I stayed silent. I didn't call Caleb. I didn't text him. I didn't show up at his apartment or reach out to Tessa. I let the protection order process continue without contest. I watched as my own name became something he was legally advised to avoid. The wedding was in 6 days. Every day that passed felt like losing him again in a slightly different way. On the 3rd day, I received official notice by certified mail. Temporary protection order granted. No contact, no proximity, no explanation allowed. I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope open, the words blurring together, and realized Veronica hadn't just cut me out of my son's life. She'd made me radioactive. That night, my phone buzzed. A blocked number. I answered before I could stop myself. Mom? Caleb's voice was barely above a whisper. I closed my eyes. You shouldn't be calling me. I know, he said quickly. I needed to hear your voice. There was something different in his tone. Fear, doubt. She told me, you might try to manipulate me, he said. That you'd cry or guilt me or deny everything. I'm not going to do any of that, I said. Silence stretched between us. She says you're dangerous, he continued. Not physically, emotionally. I felt tears sting my eyes, but forced my voice steady. Do you believe that? I don't know, he admitted. I just know that every time I talk to you, I feel pulled backward, like I can't move forward without hurting you. That's because you're letting someone else define what forward means, I said quietly. He exhaled shakily. I didn't think it would go this far. Neither did I replied. We didn't say goodbye. He hung up first. I stared at my phone long after the call ended, knowing something had shifted but not knowing whether it was enough. The next morning, Erin texted me again. She's accelerating. Something's been scheduled for Friday. Not public yet. Friday was 2 days before the wedding. Whatever Veronica was planning, she wasn't waiting anymore, and neither could I. I laid the documents out across my dining room table, every page of proof, every trace of manipulation, and finally understood the trap in full. Veronica didn't just want me gone. She wanted my son to believe he chose it. And if I wanted any chance of saving him not just from her, but from the person she was turning him into, I would have to let her think she'd already won. By the time Friday morning arrived, I had learned how to move through my own house like a ghost. I made coffee I didn't drink. I folded laundry that didn't need folding. I cleaned the same countertop twice, because my hands needed something to do while my mind stayed locked on one thought. Whatever Veronica had scheduled, it wasn't about the wedding. Weddings were distractions, symbols. The real work happened in offices and courtrooms and quiet rooms where paperwork changed lives. At 8:45, Aaron texted again. Conference room B, probate annex. 9:30 a.m., closed session. Probate. My chest tightened. Probate was for estates, trusts, guardianship, long-term control disguised as protection. I sat down at my desk and stared at the wall until the pieces finally connected in a way that made me feel physically sick. This wasn't just about cutting me off. It was about replacing me. Caleb's father, Mark, had died suddenly. No will, no trust. Everything defaulted to me. I'd managed it carefully, conservatively, always with Caleb's future in mind. I never told him numbers, never wanted him to feel like his life was being weighed against a balance sheet. Veronica knew that. If she could establish that I was emotionally unstable, manipulative, unfit, then anything I touched could be questioned. Any account I'd ever overseen, any decision I'd made on Caleb's behalf after his father died. And if she could convince a court that Caleb needed protection from me, she could position herself as the alternative. Not legally, not on paper, but strategically. Family court logic applied sideways. I didn't go to the probate annex. I knew better. Aaron had already warned me that any appearance from me would be documented, interpreted, added to the narrative. So I stayed home and waited. At 11:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Caleb. I let it ring twice before answering. "Mom," he said, and this time his voice wasn't careful. It was hollow. "What happened?" I asked. There was a pause, then a rush of words like he'd been holding his breath. "Tessa's mom says there's an issue with Dad's old accounts, that they might have been mismanaged. She says she's worried about me, about liability." My stomach dropped. "She says if something goes wrong later, I could be held responsible," he continued. "She says you didn't document things properly, that you didn't get court oversight when you should have." "That's not true," I said immediately. "I know," he said quickly. "I think. But she had documents, spreadsheets. She said she just wants to help clean things up. Help. Always help. She wants to be added as an advisor," Caleb said. "Just temporarily, to make sure everything is compliant." "And you?" I asked. "I told her I needed time," he said. "She didn't like that." "Of course she didn't." "What did you tell her about me?" I asked gently. There was a long silence. "I told her you'd be upset," he admitted. "I told her you might see it as an attack." "And what did she say?" "She said that reaction would confirm everything." I closed my eyes. "She said it proves you don't trust me to handle my own life," he continued, "that you want to stay in control." There it was again. Control. The word she kept pressing into him until it fit every situation. "Caleb," I said carefully, "if I wanted control, I wouldn't be sitting at home, following a court order that tells me I can't even text you." His breath hitched. "I didn't ask for that." "But you signed it," I replied. Silence. "I'm scared," he said finally, his voice breaking. "I don't know who to believe anymore." That sentence nearly broke me. It was the first honest thing he'd said in days. "Then do nothing," I said. "For now, don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Just breathe." He exhaled shakily. "She says delay makes things worse." "Of course she does," I said quietly. After we hung up, I sat in the stillness and let the truth settle. Veronica wasn't just isolating my son from me. She was positioning herself as the only stable authority left in his life, and she was doing it slowly enough that it felt reasonable. That afternoon, Erin came by my house. She parked down the street and walked up like a neighbor, glancing around before knocking. We sat at my dining table with the blinds half closed. She's pushing guardianship-adjacent authority, Aaron said. Not formally, yet. She's laying groundwork. I know, I said. She's careful, Aaron continued. She won't move until she has enough documentation to make it look like Caleb asked for help. I nodded. Which means I can't warn him without proving her point. Aaron leaned back in her chair. Then you don't warn him. I looked at her. Then what do I do? You document, she said. Everything. Quietly. You let her talk. You let her overreach. That could take months, I said. Aaron shook her head. Not with a wedding in 2 days. She's accelerating because she senses resistance. I thought of the way Veronica's voice had tightened on the phone, the way she didn't like being told no. She's not used to obstacles, Aaron said. She's used to compliance. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at my empty driveway. And if she succeeds? Aaron didn't answer right away. If she succeeds, she said finally, your relationship with your son won't just be damaged. It will be legally reframed. That night, I sat alone in my living room, the wedding invitation sitting untouched on the coffee table. I wasn't allowed to attend. I wasn't allowed to send a gift. I wasn't allowed to be part of it in any way that mattered. I thought about Mark, about how he trusted me with everything, about how he'd believed I would always protect our son. I thought about the version of me Veronica was painting, the overbearing mother, the emotional threat, the woman who couldn't let go. And I realized something that stopped me cold. Veronica didn't need Caleb to hate me. She just needed him to doubt me long enough to sign. That was all. I slept maybe an hour before my phone buzzed again at 2:17 a.m. A message from an unknown number. She's meeting him alone tomorrow morning. Before the ceremony, my heart started pounding. Where? I typed back. The reply came almost instantly. Her office. She told him it's just reassurance. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. This was it. The final, quiet conversation. The one where she would seal everything, away from witnesses, away from emotion, away from anyone who could interrupt the narrative she'd been building for months. I stood in the dark living room and understood the choice in front of me with terrifying clarity. If I intervened now, I would lose him forever. If I stayed silent, I might lose him legally, permanently, in ways I couldn't undo. There was only one path left, one that didn't involve convincing Caleb, pleading with him, or exposing Veronica too early. I would let her think she'd already won. I would let her take the next step. And when she did, I would make sure it was the last one she ever took. Saturday morning arrived heavy and gray, the kind of sky that presses down on you without warning. The wedding was scheduled for the afternoon at a historic venue outside the city, all white stone and manicured lawns. I wasn't going. I'd already made peace with that. What I hadn't made peace with was the meeting that was happening before it. Veronica Hart's office sat on the 3rd floor of a renovated brick building near the river. Law offices clustered there, quiet and respectable, with frosted glass doors and neutral artwork meant to calm people before their lives were rearranged. Aaron had driven by earlier that morning and confirmed Caleb's car was in the parking lot. He went in alone, she texted. No, Tessa. That detail mattered. Veronica never did anything alone unless she was certain of the outcome. I sat in my car 3 blocks away, engine off, hands clenched in my lap. I wasn't supposed to be there. I wasn't supposed to know. And I wasn't going to intervene. Not yet. Aaron sat beside me, staring straight ahead. She hadn't spoken since we parked. She's going to push him, Aaron said finally. She won't threaten. She won't rush. She'll present herself as the only adult in the room. I nodded. She already has. What are you hoping for? Aaron asked. I thought about it. About all the plans I'd run through in my head over the past 24 hours. About the sleepless night, the pacing, the weight of silence. I'm hoping she makes a mistake, I said. Aaron looked at me. She doesn't make mistakes. Everyone does, I replied. They just don't always realize when. We waited. Minutes passed slowly. A delivery truck rumbled by. A man walked his dog along the sidewalk, unaware of the quiet war happening above him. At 10:30, Aaron's phone buzzed. He's still inside. At 10:45, it buzzed again. She's pacing. I exhaled. Veronica didn't pace unless something wasn't going according to plan. At 11, Aaron's phone rang. She answered without speaking, listened for a few seconds, then handed it to me. "Mom?" Caleb's voice sounded thin, strained. I closed my eyes. "What's happening?" "She wants me to sign something," he said. "It's a letter. Not filed yet. She says it's just a statement clarifying things." "Clarifying what?" That you're emotionally compromised," he said quietly. "That you've been managing Dad's estate without transparency. That she's stepping in to help me take responsibility." My chest tightened. "And do you believe her?" "I don't know," he said. "She's very convincing." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so painfully predictable. "Caleb," I said carefully, "did she tell you not to call me?" "Yes," he admitted. "She said it would confuse things." "Did she tell you I'd react badly?" "Yes." End quote. "Did she tell you this was for your protection?" "Yes." There was a pause. "She also said," he continued, "that if I hesitate, it means I'm still under your influence." That was the overreach. I felt something settle inside me. Cold, clear. "Listen to me," I said softly. "You don't have to sign anything today. She says delay could expose me to liability." "Liability for what?" I asked. He didn't answer. "That's what I thought," I said. "Caleb, I won't tell you what to do. I won't beg. I won't argue. But I want you to do one thing for me." "What?" he asked. "Ask her to explain, in writing, exactly what legal authority she's claiming to have over your father's estate." There was a long silence. "She won't like that," he said. "No," I agreed. "She won't." Another pause. I could hear muffled voices in the background now. "Veronica," faint but present. "She's asking who you're talking to," Caleb whispered. "Tell her you needed air," I said. "Tell her you're thinking." "She's coming back," he said, panic creeping into his voice. "Caleb," I said firmly, "if she's helping you, she won't mind answering questions." "I'm scared," he admitted. "I know," I said. "But being scared doesn't mean you're wrong." The call ended abruptly. Aaron looked at me. "That was risky." "I know," I said. "But she's about to show her hand." We didn't have to wait long. At 11:20, Aaron's phone buzzed again. A message from a number she didn't recognize. He refused. "She's furious." My heart started pounding. "What do you mean refused?" Aaron typed back. "He asked for documentation." She shut it down, told him he was being manipulated. I closed my eyes. This was it. The moment where Veronica's calm mask would crack, just enough. At 11:35, Caleb's car pulled out of the parking lot. Aaron and I watched it turn onto the main road, heading in the direction of the venue. "He didn't sign," Aaron said quietly. Relief flooded me, but it was short-lived. "That doesn't mean she lost," Aaron continued. "It just means she'll change tactics." She was right. My phone buzzed as if on cue. Veronica Hart. I stared at her name on the screen, my stomach twisting. I answered. "Lena," she said, her voice cool, controlled, but tight around the edges. "We need to talk." "I don't believe we do," I replied. There was a brief silence. "Your son is confused. You've put him in an impossible position." "I wasn't aware I was allowed to speak to him," I said calmly. "You're being childish," she snapped, the mask slipping. "This isn't about you. This is about protecting Caleb from long-term consequences you refuse to acknowledge." "You mean consequences you invented," I said. Her breath hitched, just once. "You think you're clever," she said, "but you're emotional, predictable, and you're running out of time." And I smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it. "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what I was thinking about you." Her voice hardened. "If you don't step back, this will get very ugly." It already is, I replied. You just didn't expect me to notice. She laughed, sharp and humorless. You've already lost, Lena. Even if Caleb doesn't sign today, the damage is done. He sees you differently now. That doesn't go away. I know, I said. And I also know you don't threaten people when you're winning. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my hands steady now in a way they hadn't been all week. Veronica had pushed too hard. She'd let her need for control surface. She'd revealed something important. She wasn't done. Neither was I. As Aaron drove us away from the building, I felt the weight of what came next settle in. The wedding would happen without me. The smiles, the vows, the photographs would all move forward as planned. But underneath it, something had shifted. Veronica had been exposed. If only to me and Aaron, she had shown that her concern had limits, that her patience had edges, that when questioned, she reacted not like a protector, but like someone afraid of losing authority. And authority, once challenged, rarely retreats quietly. Whatever her next move was, it would be bigger, more public, more dangerous, and I would be ready. The wedding came and went without me. I watched it unfold the way you watch something on mute, through secondhand fragments and filtered images. A distant cousin posted photos on social media, white chairs in neat rows, soft afternoon light, Caleb standing tall in a navy suit, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. Veronica beside him in several frames, always just close enough to look supportive, never close enough to look controlling. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I felt something worse than either. I felt replaced. 2 days after the wedding, Erin came over again. She didn't knock this time. She let herself in quietly, like we'd already crossed some invisible line together. She's moving again, Erin said, setting her bag down. Faster than before. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched. How? She filed a petition this morning, Erin said. Not guardianship. Not yet. A request for a financial conservatorship review. My stomach dropped. On what grounds? Concern for undue influence, Erin replied. Specifically naming you. I stared at her. That doesn't make sense. Caleb is an adult. Yes, Erin said, which is why she framed it as preventative. She's claiming you exercised inappropriate financial influence during a period of grief, that you conditioned support on emotional dependence. I laughed once, short and sharp. So now loving my son after his father died is a liability. In her hands, Erin said quietly, anything can be. I pushed my chair back and stood, pacing the length of the kitchen. She didn't get him to sign. Why escalate now? Because she lost control in that meeting, Erin said. And people like Veronica don't tolerate uncertainty. They create pressure until compliance feels like relief. I stopped pacing and looked at her. She's trying to force him. Erin nodded. She's building a paper trail that makes resistance look irresponsible. That afternoon, Caleb finally came over. No warning, no call. He just stood on my porch like he wasn't sure whether he was allowed to knock. When I opened the door, he looked thinner, tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. I shouldn't be here, he said immediately. Then why are you? I asked. He exhaled. Because I don't know what's happening anymore. I know. We sat across from each other at the kitchen table, the same place where I'd helped him study for exams, where we'd eaten takeout on nights neither of us wanted to cook. She filed something today, he said, eyes fixed on the wood grain. Tessa's mom. She says it's just a review, that it protects me. I didn't interrupt. She says I need to be proactive, he continued, that if I don't cooperate, it could look like I'm hiding something. I wasn't. Do you feel like you're hiding something? I asked. He shook his head. No. Then why are you scared? He swallowed. Because she's very sure of herself. And because everyone keeps telling me this is normal. I leaned forward slightly. Who is everyone? He hesitated. Her attorney friends, her colleagues, even Tessa says her mom just wants what's best. And what do you think? I asked. He looked up at me then, and for the first time in weeks, I saw the boy I raised. the one who asked questions, the one who hated being rushed. I think, he said slowly, that every time I push back, she tightens her grip. I nodded. That's not protection. He rubbed his face with his hands. She says you're manipulating me against her. And does it feel that way? I asked. No, he admitted. It feels like I'm being managed. That word again. Managed. Caleb, I said quietly. Has she ever explained what happens if you don't go along with this? He shook his head. She just says it would be a mistake. I reached into the drawer beside me and pulled out a folder I'd been building silently for days. Copies of the affidavit drafts, Aaron's documentation, notes from our conversations. I haven't shown you any of this because I didn't want to put you in the middle, I said. But you're already there. He stared at the folder like it might bite him. What is it? Proof, I said. Not that I'm right, that she has a pattern. He didn't touch it. If I look at that, she'll say you pressured me. She'll say that no matter what, I replied. The question is whether you want to know what she's doing before or after she does it. He sat back, breathing hard. What if she's right? About what? I asked. That you never let go, he said. That you still see me as a child. I felt the sting of that, sharp and immediate. I see you as my son, I said, which means I see your strengths and your blind spots, just like you see mine. Quote. He closed his eyes. She says, love shouldn't feel heavy. Love feels heavy when someone else is trying to replace it, I said. We sat in silence for a long time. Finally, he reached for the folder. He didn't read everything. Just enough. His hands started shaking halfway through. She wrote this, he said, pointing to a margin comment. This part about feeling suffocated. Yes, I said. I said that word because she suggested it, he whispered. I didn't even realize. It's node. I watched something break behind his eyes. Not collapse. Fracture. She told me it was my language, he said. That it came from me. That's how manipulation works, I said gently. It borrows your voice. He stood abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the yard. She's doing this to me, he said. Not for me. Yes, I replied. He turned back. What do we do? That was the question I'd been preparing for. We don't fight her directly, I said. Not yet. He frowned. Then how do we stop her? We let her commit, I said. Fully, publicly, in a way she can't explain away. His eyes widened. You're asking me to let her hurt me. I shook my head. I'm asking you to let her show who she really is. He stared at me, fear and resolve battling across his face. And if I can't? He asked. Then you walk away, I said. And I will accept that. He swallowed hard. She's filing the review in 3 weeks. I nodded. Then, that's our window. End quote. He took a deep breath. Okay, it wasn't a promise. It wasn't certainty. But it was enough. Because for the first time since this began, Veronica Hart no longer had exclusive access to my son's trust. And that was the beginning of the end. The next 3 weeks moved differently than time usually does. Not fast, not slow, pressurized. Every day felt like it was leaning toward something inevitable, even when nothing outwardly happened. Veronica didn't contact me again. That silence was deliberate. She was working through official channels now, letting paperwork do the talking. Caleb received emails framed as concern, calendar invites labeled review, documents sent for transparency. Everything was calm, professional, unimpeachable. And that was the problem. Because when manipulation stops being emotional, it becomes procedural. Aaron arranged a meeting with a lawyer she trusted, not a family friend, not someone Veronica might recognize. A man named Daniel Brooks, late 40s, specialized in civil fiduciary disputes. He didn't smile when we sat down in his office. He didn't offer reassurance. He just listened. When we finished laying everything out, the affidavits, the drafts, the timing, Veronica's role, he leaned back and exhaled through his nose. She's very good, he said. That's not comforting, Caleb muttered. Daniel nodded. It shouldn't be. She's doing something dangerous. but she's doing it carefully. Can we stop it? I asked. He considered that. Not the way you want. Silence settled over the room. What does that mean? Caleb asked. It means, Daniel said slowly, that as of right now, nothing she's done is illegal. It's unethical. It's coercive. But it's wrapped in consent. Caleb's jaw tightened. My consent. Yes, Daniel replied. Which is exactly why she's focused on you. I felt my chest tighten. So what happens if this review goes through? Daniel folded his hands. Best case, it gets dismissed. Worst case, the court appoints an independent evaluator who starts scrutinizing past decisions. That opens doors Veronica doesn't need to walk through herself. She just needs to point. And the protection order? I asked. Daniel grimaced. That complicates things. It strengthens her argument that there's emotional volatility. Caleb rubbed his face. So I just let her? Daniel looked at him directly. You don't sign anything new. You don't agree to anything informal. You let her escalate. My heart skipped. Escalate how? She'll overreach, Daniel said. People like her always do when they think time is on their side. And then, Caleb asked. Then we catch her creating authority she doesn't have, Daniel replied. Or applying pressure she can't justify. That sounds risky, Caleb said. It is, Daniel agreed. Because it requires patience and discomfort. And because you'll be the one standing closest to the fire. I looked at my son. He looked older than he had a month ago. Less certain, but also clearer. If I do this, Caleb said, she'll say I'm proving her right. Daniel nodded. She'll say that no matter what. The question is whether she says it privately or on the record. That was the line. On the record. We left Daniel's office with a plan that didn't feel like a plan. No confrontation. No grand reveal. Just documentation and waiting. Waiting while Veronica pressed. And she did. The emails increased. The tone shifted. Less reassurance, more urgency. She began copying other professionals on threads, accountants, evaluators, attorneys building a chorus that made resistance look irrational. Caleb forwarded everything to Aaron and me. She's pushing me to sign a consent form, he told me one night over the phone. She says it's optional, but that refusing could delay resolution. What does it give her? I asked. Access, he said, to financial records. To speak on my behalf. I closed my eyes. Don't sign. I know, he said. But she's getting impatient. I heard it in his voice. The strain, the exhaustion. You don't have to keep doing this, I said quietly. You can step away. No, he said immediately. If I walk away now, she wins. And I'll never know how far she would have gone. A week before the scheduled review, Veronica requested a private meeting with Caleb. No lawyers, no email trail, just a conversation. Daniel advised against it. That's where pressure happens, he said. Caleb insisted. I need to hear it, he told me. Directly. The meeting took place at Veronica's office again. Aaron waited across the street. I stayed home, staring at my phone like it was a lifeline. The call came 20 minutes in. She's angry, Caleb whispered. She says I'm being ungrateful. What else? I asked. She says if I don't trust her, it means I'm still under your influence, he said. She keeps using that phrase. And? I prompted. And she just told me. His voice dropped. That if this review goes badly, she'll have no choice but to advise Tessa to reconsider the marriage. My breath caught. She's threatening your relationship. She says it's not a threat, he said bitterly. She says it's foresight. Did she say that out loud? I asked. Yes, he said. Did anyone else hear it? I asked. Silence. She didn't want witnesses, he said. That was the mistake. Because when control stops being subtle, it starts leaving fingerprints. The review hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Neutral room, 3 evaluators. Veronica seated beside Caleb like a pillar. I wasn't allowed to attend, but I didn't need to. Aaron sat in the back with a notepad. Daniel was there, and Caleb steady, quiet, no longer defensive. When Veronica spoke, she was measured, calm. She described me as well-intentioned but emotionally enmeshed. She described Caleb as vulnerable, still grieving, in need of guidance. Then she crossed a line. "I've had to step in," she said, "because when a parent refuses to release control, the adult child's life stagnates. It affects marriages, careers, stability." One of the evaluators leaned forward. "Are you suggesting Miss Monroe's influence is ongoing?" "Yes," Veronica replied smoothly. "And harmful. On what basis?" the evaluator asked. Veronica smiled. "Caleb can explain. It's tension." All eyes turned to my son. He took a breath. "No," he said. The room went still. Veronica's smile froze. "No?" the evaluator repeated. Caleb sat up straighter. "That's not accurate." Veronica turned toward him, eyes sharp. "Caleb, I didn't ask you to speak for me," he said calmly. "And you don't get to define my relationships." Veronica's composure cracked, just a little. "We discussed this." "Yes," he said, privately, "where you told me my marriage depended on compliance. I have rated." One of the evaluators looked up sharply. "You said that?" Veronica laughed softly. "That's not how I have notes," Caleb said, time-stamped. Silence. Daniel stood. "We'd like to submit supplementary documentation." That was the moment the room shifted. Veronica hadn't expected resistance. She'd expected obedience, and when she didn't get it, she revealed exactly what she was trying to hide. The review was suspended before lunch. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Erin called as soon as she stepped outside the building. I was sitting at my kitchen table, the same place I'd spent weeks waiting for news that could either end or salvage my relationship with my son. "It didn't go the way she planned," Erin said, and I could hear the controlled disbelief in her voice. "What happened?" I asked. "She pushed," Erin replied. "Hard. And when she did, the room noticed." "One?" I closed my eyes and exhaled for what felt like the first time in days. Veronica Hart had always relied on one thing above all else: that no one would question her authority out loud, that everyone would assume her calm meant correctness, that her confidence would be mistaken for competence. Caleb broke that assumption, but breaking it came at a cost. That evening, Caleb came over again. He didn't knock. He just walked in like he used to when this was still his home in every sense of the word. He looked wrecked. "I didn't think she'd turn on me that fast," he said, sinking into a chair. "She didn't turn," I replied. "She revealed." He stared at his hands. "She texted Tessa while we were in the room. Told her I was being erratic, that the stress was getting to me." My stomach tightened. "What did Tessa say?" "She hasn't replied," he said. "Her mom told her not to." Tag did. We sat in silence. The weight of that settling between us. "I did what you asked," Caleb said quietly. I stayed calm. I didn't accuse. I just told the truth. "I know," I said. "And it still blew up," he continued. "I feel like I stepped off a cliff." I reached across the table and put my hand over his. He didn't pull away this time. "This was always going to hurt," I said. The only question was who. That night, the consequences started rolling in. Veronica didn't call. She didn't text. She didn't send a follow-up email clarifying anything. Instead, she went silent, which was worse, because silence from someone like her wasn't retreat. It was recalculation. 2 days later, Daniel called. "She's filed a complaint with the licensing board," he said. My heart dropped. "Against who?" "You," he replied, "alleging coercive financial abuse during a dependent period." Caleb stood up from the couch when he heard that. "That's a lie." Of course it is," Daniel said evenly. "But complaints don't need to be true to be damaging. They just need to exist." The board opened a preliminary inquiry, not because there was evidence, but because procedure required it. I was placed on administrative leave from my job pending review. Just like that. Years of compliance work. Years of spotless records. And now I was being evaluated under the very standards I'd spent my career enforcing. That's what she does, Erin said when I told her. She reframes resistance as pathology. The next week was a blur of phone calls and paperwork. Requests for records, interviews, timelines. Everything I'd ever done for my son was being reviewed through the lens of suspicion. Caleb watched it happen, helpless. I didn't know she could reach this far, he said one night, sitting at my kitchen table while I sorted documents. She can't, I said, not permanently, but she can make it hurt. Tessa finally called him that weekend. He took the call outside, pacing the driveway while I watched through the window. When he came back in, his face was pale. She thinks I humiliated her mom, he said. She says I embarrassed the family. And what do you think? I asked. I think, he said slowly, that her mom cares more about control than about either of us. That was the moment I knew Veronica had lost him. But losing him didn't mean she would stop. It meant she would punish. The licensing board interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday. The night before, I barely slept. Not because I was afraid of the truth coming out, but because I knew the truth wasn't always enough. At 6:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You should have stayed quiet. No signature. No explanation. I stared at the screen until it went dark again. The interview itself was sterile. 2 board members, 1 recorder, neutral questions. Did you ever condition financial assistance on emotional compliance? No. Did your son feel pressure to maintain contact, to retain support? No. Did you ever discourage independence? No. They listened. They nodded. They wrote. When it was over, one of them looked at me carefully. Miss Monroe, do you believe this complaint was filed in good faith? I paused. No, I said. I believe it was filed to regain leverage. The woman nodded once. Thank you, as experienced as do. That afternoon, Erin called again. The evaluators are reopening the review, she said. Not against you, against Veronica. My knees nearly gave out. She crossed a line, Erin continued. The threat to the marriage, the pressure, the licensing complaint. It's a pattern now. Caleb came over that evening with a duffel bag. I can't stay with Tessa right now, he said quietly. Not until this is resolved. I didn't celebrate that. I didn't say, I told you so. I just nodded and helped him carry his bag inside. That night, for the first time in months, we sat in the living room and watched a movie without talking about court or filings or strategy. But the peace didn't last. 3 days later, Daniel called with urgency in his voice. She's requesting a private mediation, he said. With you. With me? I asked. Yes, he said. No, Caleb. No third parties. She says she wants to clear the air. I laughed once, hollow. That's a trap. 8. It is, Daniel agreed. But it's also an opportunity. To do what? I asked. To get her on record, he said, saying the things she only says when she thinks she's still in control. I looked at Caleb, who had been listening quietly from the doorway. He shook his head. Don't go. I thought about it, about everything she'd taken, everything she'd tried to reshape. I have to, I said. Why? Caleb asked. Because she still thinks this is between her and me, I replied. And she won't realize it's over until she says too much. The mediation was scheduled for Thursday morning. I didn't sleep the night before, not because I was afraid of her, but because I knew what was coming next would decide whether the truth stayed contained or finally came out where it couldn't be controlled. The mediation office was smaller than I expected. Neutral walls, a low table with bottled water, no windows, the kind of place designed to make people talk because there was nowhere else for the words to go. Veronica was already there when I arrived. She stood when she saw me, smoothing the front of her blazer like this was a business meeting she intended to dominate. Her smile was tight, professional, carefully calibrated. Lena, she said, I'm glad you came. I didn't return the smile. I sat across from her and placed my bag at my feet. My phone was inside, recording, just like Daniel instructed, legal, documented, silent. The mediator, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, took his seat between us. He explained the rules: confidentiality, voluntary participation, respectful dialogue. Veronica nodded at all the right moments. "I want to start by saying this never should have escalated," she said once he finished. "I truly regret how distressed you've been." There it was, distressed. Not wronged, not targeted. "I'm not distressed," I replied. "I'm documenting." Her eyes flickered for half a second. "I've always admired how devoted you are to Caleb," she continued. "But devotion can cross into dependency without intention." "On whose part?" I asked. She smiled. "That's exactly the problem. You don't see it." The mediator cleared his throat. "Let's focus on specific concerns." Veronica turned to him. "Of course. My concern is Caleb's well-being. He's been under significant emotional pressure for years. Losing his father, being raised by a single parent who understandably made him her entire world. I felt the familiar sting, but I stayed still. That kind of dynamic," she went on, "creates confusion when the child becomes an adult. They feel guilty for growing, for choosing their own life." "You mean marrying your daughter?" I said. She waved that away. "Tessa is incidental." That word landed hard. "Caleb's hesitation," Veronica continued, "isn't about me. It's about disentangling from a relationship that's no longer healthy." The mediator glanced at me. "Miss Monroe, I'd like to ask Veronica a question," I said calmly. She nodded graciously. "Of course. When did you first decide I was a threat to my son?" I asked. Her lips curved into something almost sympathetic. "I didn't decide," I observed. "What specifically?" I pressed. "You hover," she said. "You manage. You insert yourself into decisions that don't require your input." "Like what?" I asked. She leaned back. "Finances, emotional support, direction." I nodded. "And when you observed this, what did you do?" "I intervened," she said without hesitation. "Someone had to." The mediator's pen paused. "Intervened how?" I asked. "I helped Caleb articulate feelings he didn't have language for," she said. "I helped him recognize patterns of manipulation." "Manipulation," I repeated. "Such as?" She tilted her head. "Financial assistance tied to emotional compliance." My voice stayed even. "When did Caleb tell you he felt that way?" She hesitated. "Just a fraction. Over time." "Before or after you drafted affidavits for him?" I asked. Her eyes snapped to mine. "Excuse me?" "You drafted documents," I said, with suggested emotional language. "That's standard preparation," she said sharply. "You wouldn't understand." "I understand compliance very well," I replied. "That's my profession." The mediator shifted in his seat. "Miss Hart, did you prepare documents for Mr. Monroe?" Veronica inhaled slowly. "I assisted, as any mediator would." "Without legal representation present?" the mediator asked. She smiled again. "He didn't ask for one, and you didn't suggest one," I said. "I didn't need to," she replied. "He trusted me." There it was. The word she relied on. "Did you tell him his marriage depended on cooperation?" I asked. Her expression hardened. "I told him choices have consequences." "Did you threaten to advise your daughter to reconsider the marriage if he didn't comply?" I asked. "That's a gross mischaracterization," she snapped. "So you didn't say it?" I pressed. She stared at me, jaw tight. "I said his instability could affect his relationships." The mediator leaned forward. "Miss Hart, did you imply that his marriage was at risk if he didn't follow your guidance?" Veronica exhaled sharply. I was being realistic. Silence filled the room. I let it stretch. "And when he refused to sign," I continued, "you filed a licensing complaint against me." She scoffed. "I reported concerning behavior. Within 48 hours, I said. After you lost influence." Her voice rose. "You are twisting this." "Am I?" I asked. "Or are you reacting because control slipped?" The mediator raised a hand. Let's slow down. No, Veronica said, suddenly standing. This is exactly what I warned about. She provokes. She reframes. She makes herself the victim. I stayed seated. You couldn't let go, Veronica said, her composure cracking. You couldn't accept that your son needed someone else. Someone else, I repeated. Or someone in charge. Her eyes flashed. Someone competent. The room went quiet. The mediator looked at her carefully. Miss Hart, please sit down. She didn't. You think because you raised him you own him, Veronica continued, voice sharp now. But you don't. He needed structure, authority, and you resent me because I provided it. I felt my heart pounding. But my voice stayed calm. You didn't provide authority. You took advantage of grief. She laughed bitterly. Grief makes people pliable. The mediator stood. Miss Hart, you think this is over? She snapped, turning back to me. You think because he hesitated you've won? He will come back. They always do. They need someone who tells them what to do. I looked at her steadily. Not when they realize the cost. She stared at me, breathing hard, and then she said the thing she couldn't take back. I saved him from you, she said. And if I have to destroy your credibility to keep him free, I will. The mediator's face went pale. I reached into my bag and set my phone on the table. I don't think you realized, I said quietly, that this mediation is on record. End quote. Her eyes widened. The mediator cleared his throat. Miss Hart, I need you to understand that statements made here may be subject to disclosure given ongoing proceedings. Veronica sat down slowly, color draining from her face. For the first time since I met her, she looked unsure, because in her need to dominate the room, she had forgotten the one thing she always relied on: silence, and she had broken it herself. The fallout began before I even reached my car. Daniel called while I was still in the hallway outside the mediation room. His voice was tight, controlled in a way that told me he already knew something had gone very wrong for Veronica. We have enough, he said. More than enough. I leaned against the wall, my knees weak. She said it out loud. I know, he replied. The mediator contacted the board within minutes. He flagged coercion, abuse of authority, and retaliatory action. It's noted. I closed my eyes. I could still hear Veronica's voice in my head. Grief makes people pliable. The calm cruelty of it, the certainty. What happens now? I asked. She doesn't control the timeline anymore, Daniel said, and she knows it. By the time I got home, Caleb was already there. He was standing in the living room like he didn't trust the furniture to hold him. She called me, he said before I could speak. My mother-in-law called me while you were still in that meeting. My chest tightened. What did she say? He swallowed. She told me you were attacking her, that you were trying to ruin her career. And you? I asked her one question, he said. I asked her why she told me my marriage depended on compliance. I waited. She told me, he continued, his voice hollow, that sometimes you have to scare people into doing what's best for them. I sat down heavily. That's when I knew, Caleb said. Not that she was wrong about you, but that she was willing to hurt anyone who didn't obey her. He ran a hand through his hair, shaking. She admitted it like it was normal. The next morning, the licensing board contacted Daniel directly. They weren't interested in my conduct anymore. They were interested in Veronica's. Her role as a mediator was placed under emergency review pending investigation. The complaint she filed against me was suspended and marked retaliatory. But that wasn't the twist. The twist came 2 days later. Erin called just after noon. Her voice was tight with adrenaline. She's not just being investigated, Erin said. They found something. What? I asked. Multiple sealed cases, she replied. Quiet settlements. Families who withdrew complaints after sudden mediation reversals. Patterns of emotional coercion that never made it to trial because the victims believed they were the problem. My heart pounded. How many? At least 6, Erin said. And that's just what surfaced when her communications were subpoenaed. Caleb sat across from me, listening. his face draining of color. "This wasn't about us," he said slowly. "No," I replied. "We were just the next version." The investigation widened quickly. Veronica's emails were pulled, drafts, notes, language reused across cases. The same phrases, the same framing, the same strategy of isolating one party and positioning herself as the only rational authority. But the final revelation didn't come from a file. It came from Tessa. She showed up at my door late one evening, eyes red, hands shaking. "I didn't know," she said immediately. "I swear I didn't know." I let her in. She sat on the edge of the couch like she was afraid to take up space. "She did this to me too," she said quietly. "My whole life." Caleb froze. "What do you mean?" "She taught me how to doubt myself," Tessa said. "How to hand decisions over so I wouldn't mess them up. She told me independence was selfish." Tears spilled over her cheeks. "When you pushed back, Caleb, she told me you were becoming unstable, that I needed to be ready to leave." Caleb's breath hitched. "She planned to break us up." Tessa nodded. "If you didn't comply." I watched my son crumble in a way I couldn't stop. Not because he was weak, but because he finally understood the scope of what she had tried to do. This wasn't just about me. It was about ownership. The board issued a formal suspension within a week. Veronica's mediation license was revoked, pending criminal referral for coercion, retaliation, and abuse of professional authority. But the consequences didn't end there. Families came forward, quietly at first, then publicly. Stories echoed ours with chilling precision. Adult children turned against parents, parents labeled unstable. Financial control shifted. Relationships fractured beyond repair. Veronica Hart didn't just manipulate outcomes. She engineered obedience. Caleb moved out of the apartment he shared with Tessa temporarily, not because they were done, but because he needed space to understand who he was without someone else narrating his choices. "I don't know how to trust my instincts anymore," he admitted one night, sitting across from me. "You relearn," I said. Slowly, the court formally dismissed the review. The protection order expired and was not renewed. My job reinstated me with a written apology, but something irreversible had already happened. My son had stood in a room and watched someone he trusted admit she would destroy me to control him. And that knowledge didn't come without cost. Veronica Hart was charged months later, not with fraud, not with theft, with coercive control. A charge rarely used, hard to prove, but devastating when documented. The irony was almost unbearable. She spent her career managing other people's family conflicts, and lost everything because she believed power meant silence. In the end, she didn't go to prison. She lost something worse: her authority, her credibility, her ability to stand in a room and be believed. Caleb watched the news coverage quietly, his face unreadable. "I thought I was choosing independence," he said. "I didn't realize I was being trained to betray you." I didn't answer right away, because the truth was harder than either of us wanted. He had been both victim and participant, and loving him didn't erase that. It just meant the consequences would take longer to settle. The silence afterward was louder than anything that came before. When the investigations ended and the headlines faded, there was no dramatic return to normal. No moment where everything snapped back into place. Just space. Long, uncomfortable space where emotions had nowhere to hide. Caleb moved into the spare bedroom for a while, then into a short-term rental across town. Not because we argued, not because I pushed him away, but because he didn't know how to sit in the same room with me without replaying every choice he'd made. "I need to figure out who I am without someone steering me," he told me when he packed his things. I nodded. "That makes sense." He looked surprised. Maybe he expected resistance. Maybe he still believed some part of the story Veronica had planted. We didn't hug. That was the first consequence. Tessa moved out of state for a few months to stay with a friend. She and Caleb spoke occasionally, carefully, like people afraid the wrong word might break something already cracked. Their marriage didn't end, but it didn't survive intact either. It hovered in a kind of suspended reality, where neither of them knew if rebuilding was possible. People assume exposure fixes things, that once the truth is out, healing follows naturally. It doesn't. Truth just removes the lies. What's left still hurts. I returned to work under scrutiny that hadn't existed before. Colleagues were polite but cautious, as if proximity to scandal might be contagious. I did my job well, as I always had, but something fundamental had shifted. I no longer believed that doing everything right protected you from being rewritten by someone else. At night, I replayed the mediation in my head. Veronica's voice, the certainty, the way she said she saved him from me. Sometimes I wondered if part of her believed it. Caleb didn't contact me for weeks after he moved out, not because he was angry, because he was ashamed. When he finally did, it was a text. "Can we talk?" We met at a diner halfway between our houses, neutral territory, a place that didn't belong to either of us. He looked thinner, older, like someone who had learned something too early. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said immediately. "I wouldn't forgive me." I studied his face, the same eyes Mark had, the same nervous habit of rubbing his thumb against his knuckle. "You didn't just doubt me," I said. "You helped her." He nodded, eyes wet. "I did. I told her things. I repeated her words like they were mine." "You chose her authority over my truth," I continued. "That wasn't manipulation alone. That was a decision." He didn't argue. "I know," he whispered, "and I don't know how to live with that. I have descended." We sat there for a long time, the sound of silverware and low conversation filling the space between us. "I still love you," I said finally. "But love doesn't erase consequences." He looked up at me, hope flickering, and then settling into something quieter. "I'll take whatever boundaries you need," he said. "Whatever time." That was the second consequence. Time didn't soften things quickly. Months passed. Caleb went to therapy twice a week. He stopped asking for reassurance. He stopped asking for advice. He learned how to sit with uncertainty without outsourcing it to someone else. He wrote letters he didn't send, apologies he didn't expect me to receive. I found one of them accidentally when he left a notebook behind during a visit. I didn't read it. I closed it and put it back exactly where it was. Some things needed to stay his. The case against Veronica moved slowly. Victims testified. Statements were recorded. Her name became shorthand in professional circles for ethical collapse. But justice didn't feel satisfying. It felt hollow, because no ruling could give me back the version of my son, who trusted me without hesitation. 6 months after the mediation, Caleb showed up at my door without warning. "I paid off the last of the loans you covered," he said, holding out an envelope. "I know you didn't ask. I needed to." I took the envelope but didn't open it. "This isn't about money." "I have. I know," he said. But I needed to remove every excuse she gave me. We stood in the doorway, the space between us charged but no longer hostile. "I don't need you to pretend this didn't happen," I said. "I need you to understand that some trust doesn't come back in the same shape." He nodded. "I understand." That night, after he left, I sat alone and let myself grieve properly for the first time. Not just for the betrayal, but for the illusion that love alone protected families from power. Caleb had been both victim and accomplice. And accepting that meant accepting that my pain wasn't something he could apologize away. The final consequence came quietly. I stopped trying to be the center of his life, not because I didn't care, but because I refused to be something anyone could weaponize again. And in that space, something fragile and honest began to form. Not forgiveness, not yet, but accountability. And sometimes, that's the only foundation strong enough to build on. A year passed before anything that looked like peace showed up. Not closure, not resolution, just a quiet understanding that we were no longer standing in the wreckage, even if we still carried pieces of it. Caleb didn't move back home. He rented a small place near the river, close enough to visit, far enough to feel like his own. We met once a week at first, always somewhere neutral. Coffee shops, public parks, places where conversation felt contained. Gradually, Those meetings became less about processing the past and more about navigating the present. He stopped asking for permission. He stopped asking for approval. When he asked for advice, it came with a choice already made. That was new. One Sunday afternoon, he came over to help me fix a broken cabinet hinge. We worked side by side in the kitchen, passing tools back and forth without much talking. At one point, he paused and looked at me. "I hear her voice sometimes," he said quietly. "I didn't ask who. When I hesitate," he continued, "when I feel unsure, it tells me someone else should decide." I nodded. "And what do you do?" "I wait," he said, "until it passes." That was how I knew he was healing. The trial against Veronica never happened. Most cases like hers don't end with courtrooms and verdicts. They end with negotiated exits, license revocations, quiet settlements that keep institutions intact. She lost her practice. She lost her standing. Her name disappeared from mediation rosters and professional directories. Power, stripped of legitimacy, evaporates quickly. Sometimes people ask me if I feel satisfied. I don't. I feel changed. Caleb and Tessa didn't divorce. They also didn't pretend everything was fine. They rebuilt their marriage slowly, with boundaries that hadn't existed before. Tessa went to therapy on her own. She learned to hear her mother's voice without obeying it. One evening, months later, she came to me alone. "I'm sorry," she said simply, "for believing her, for letting her frame you." I believed her apology. That surprised me, because I'd learned that forgiveness isn't about who deserves it. It's about who takes responsibility without conditions. Caleb and I never went back to what we were, and we never should have. The version of love that allows someone else to step in and take control isn't love. It's dependency, and dependency is easily exploited. What we have now is quieter. He doesn't call every day, he doesn't share everything, and I don't expect him to. When he makes mistakes, he owns them. When he struggles, he sits with it before reaching out. And when he chooses me, it's because he wants to, not because someone taught him he should. On the anniversary of the mediation, I went back to that neutral office building alone. I stood outside for a moment, watching people come and go, unaware of the battles fought quietly inside rooms like that. I thought about how close I came to losing my son without ever knowing why. Not to death, but to authority disguised as care. If there's anything this experience taught me, it's this. Power rarely announces itself. It doesn't need to. It wears the face of concern. It speaks calmly. It tells you it knows better. And the most dangerous thing power can do is convince someone they chose it freely. My son believed he was choosing independence when he turned away from me. What he was really choosing was relief from doubt, from responsibility, from the discomfort of standing on his own. And I had to accept that loving him meant letting him learn the difference the hard way. We don't talk about Veronica anymore. There's no need. Her influence died the moment it was spoken aloud. But sometimes, late at night, I still think about the janitor in the courthouse, the masking tape labels. The way he told me I wasn't ready to hear what was coming. He was right. None of us ever are. If you're watching this and something feels familiar, trust that feeling. If someone is isolating you from the people who love you, telling you they're the problem, urging secrecy in the name of protection, that's not guidance. That's control. And control always demands silence. I didn't win this story. I survived it. And so did my son. Not unchanged, not unscarred, but aware. And sometimes, awareness is the most powerful thing you can reclaim.